Thank you. And we might ask people, are you happy to open our meeting with a karakia?
Tēnā rā koutou te whānau e noho mai nei I raro I te tuanui o tēnei whare o tātou, te imu tahi tātou. E te atua kaharawa manakitia mai mātou I hui mai I tēnei rā. Mai kia mātou, o whakaro tika, kupu pono, kāna ki ngā kaupapa I mua I tātou. E pā, te kina mai E tahi o mātou I taumaha ana, I raro I te kapua taumaha o tā mātou hoa. A whenutia te whānau o tēnei mahi I tēnei wā. Hoa tō rangi Māori kia mātou I tēnei wā papauri. Nō reira, e pā, e whakamoi, moi me te whakawhita ki a koe. I ngā wā katoa. Amen.
If we might start with perhaps just in terms of our welcoming comments, if I could just acknowledge that Janelle Ladbrook, who's been a long-serving association, a long-standing association with both Southland District Council and with Southland and Southland is very unwelcome and understand in Southland Hospice. And, I just want to extend our best wishes to her and her family a really sad, difficult and challenging time. To let you know that our thoughts and prayers are with them at this difficult time. So I think it was worth acknowledging, given that the respect and aroha that people in the community hold for her. On that basis, continuing on, apologies
for late Stu.
Accepted, thank you, Tom.
Just like this for Councillor Menzies as well.
Councillor Menzies expected.
Apology for email.
Apologies also from Rob Phillips and Grant Dermodale. Apologies from those ones as well. Any others need to register?
Just apology for Debbie Lascelles.
Moving on then to the confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting. We've had a chance to have a look at those, and hopefully we've got the action sheet which accompanies the minutes. So the minutes themselves, perhaps the one thing I would acknowledge is there was one action that I had undertaken to lead on, and that was public communication around the workshop in February, and I have not done that, and that was very much an omission from me. I think what strikes me as I realise about that omission is, in the very near future, we do need to continue with public engagement, public announcement, and we've got a couple of positive things to celebrate alongside that, and that is a new key staff member for Emergency Management Southland, and also, and I should have introduced Phil Mackay at the start, my apologies. You're wondering who this strange face is sitting out there for those who haven't met him, but I suspect everyone has met him, or most people have met him today, so that's a positive thing. And one of the agenda items today is, of course, is the adoption of the group plan updated for the 5-year period. I think that's another milestone that, assuming, or if it does, as if it is adopted today, I think that's a positive milestone worth communicating to the community as well. But returning to the other aspects of the minutes, is there any concerns with the minutes as an accurate record of what was discussed last time?
I'll move that we receive them.
Thank you, Tom. Someone to second that?
Sorry, I can't go on with me.
Well, thank you, Neil. Any further discussion on those? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Great, thank you. Matters arising in the action sheet. Can I turn to you to speak to a few of those things?
So item 5.4, unfortunately Alice was unable to attend today's meeting. She's actually presenting at the IMPA conference in Australia, so she will attend a future meeting. Item 5.5, can we just note an update? It's 5.3 of the in today's agenda, I have a breakdown of the costs associated with support costs. Again, 5.5, there's also a breakdown has been completed and included in 5.3 of the agenda today as well. And 6.12, this is an item that for the new manager to pursue. We have, sorry, that one, 4.4, the OSC chair will give an update on the group foundational document overview.
Thank you. You haven't front loaded too much for the new manager in this action sheet, or have we? Sorry, no, we're just being a little flippant there.
A couple of things.
A couple of things, ease them into the role, so, yeah.
Through you, Chair, might just worth note that the OSC met just a month ago and talked about the list of priorities from each of the councils for the new manager to be gripping up. So we had put some pre-thought into the priorities for the next 3 to 6 months for the new manager.
Yep. Suggestions and guidance there. Thank you. Any other questions on the action sheet?
So, Chair, just item 8, we're actually finished shaping up the terms of reference. We're now in the stage where we're actually out for procuring that resource to engage that.
Okay, thank you. Any others, questions or comments people want to offer on that one? Thank you. Moving into reports. I personally don't have a report, but the ones we've got on the agenda, we've got agenda item 5.1, coordinating executive group's chair report, and the recommendation that will be accompanying this one is to receive the report. So I'll hand over to Michael.
Thank you for that, Chair. It's a very brief update in relation to it, and the reason it's a brief update is nearly everything that went through Keith this time is sitting on the agenda for discussion from group. We did have some updates in relation to situation around the region as well, just some insights into some pressing challenges from both our partners in the ministry functions and also in the other defence functions. There are some things we need to be focused on as a region in relation to upcoming weather events and changing conditions associated to Niño. So that is something that we need to keep a watch on. We also talked about the things that are in the item, but also we had the similar in relation to acknowledgement about the work that the current EMS are undertaking, and big shout out and support in relation to their coverage that they've had to do over this last wee while. So other than that, I'll leave you with some discussions on the items until we go through the actual report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Michael at this point, knowing that much of what we touched on will be covered in the agenda item to follow? Okay, thank you. Would someone like to move that report is received? Thank you, Rob and you, Tom. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carry. Thank you. Agenda item 5.2 is the operational update.
Chair. So I'd like to receive the report as read, noting the activities undertaken and the progress achieved by the EMS team during this reporting period, in alignment with our 2025-2026 work plan, and also acknowledging the operational pressures faced during the reporting period and the continued focus on maintaining readiness and statutory obligations. A couple of things in the report, the group plan update. So since the report was done, we have had feedback from the Minister, which is attached further in the agenda, along with the letter from the Minister. So that'll be reported on 5.4. With regard to the building update, we have had quotes come in for the remaining work, and we're awaiting the GM of Finance of ES for approval on that, and there'll be a further update in July once that work has been finished. Within they are the main extras to that, but happy to take any questions if anyone wants clarification on anything else within the report.
Thank you. Questions on the operational update?
It's probably more a comment than a question, or a question in relation, and Lucy might be able to answer this, around the subcommittee list that's been given to the new manager around our community board engagement around the response plans and all that. So if that focus has been, like, there's no point in me asking the question if that focus has been given, but I'd just like to see that work is being done, and just ensuring that the community board link is put through, and then also the Auckland Hazard Working Group as well, where we've got some feedback from our local council there wanting to be involved. So if that's been included in that list, then we can carry on.
Yeah, so through you, Chair. So definitely the first point has been passed through the operating subcommittee prioritisation to the new manager in terms of the response plans and the engagement as well with community boards. In relation to the field of hazard one, that hasn't come up through that route. So was there something specific that you would like us to flag or be flagged here? And we
Yeah, there's just linking in with our local councillor there in terms of the governance aspect. I think we need to bridge that connection. So it's a conversation. Yeah, sure. Even the fellow councillor would be useful.
Yep. Very sensible, and something we can respond to. Any other questions on the operational update or comments? No? Okay, well, thank you for that, Janine. There's 3 recommendations accompanying this one. One is to receive the report. The second one is to note the activities undertaken and the progress achieved by Emergency Management Southland during the reporting period in alignment with the 25-26 work plan. And the third one is to acknowledge the operational pressures faced during the reporting period and the continued focus on maintaining readiness and statutory obligations. Thank you, Tom. Second of that one, thank you, Neville. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. The next agenda item is 5.3, the financial update.
Tracy's just scooted out to get Jodie. Yeah.
Right, so Jodie's going to speak to that one. While we're waiting, just to note, the recommendations on this one are to receive the report, which is the financial report, and the second recommendation is to provide advice or advise on any further requests for reporting adjustments. So just to flag that those are the 2 recommendations associated with this agenda item. As we wait for Jodie to step in and join us. Lucy, is there any comments you'd offer while we're waiting? We'll prefer to defer the discussion. Welcome, Jodie. Not meaning to throw you into the hot seat. We're just up to agenda item 5.3, the financial report for this one.
I'm like straight in. I think the same thing happened a week ago.
It did.
So I'm getting used to this now. So I'm just going to take the report as read. This was incorporating some of the changes that were brought up from the previous meetings, and so I pulled those through into the format of this report. And there was a specific request around the support cost allocation and their split going back to the original agreement. So I tried to incorporate those. But if there's any questions, then
So first of all, there was the specific request to break up the ES support costs. Was that easy to do? Was that a straightforward exercise, or?
Not how it related to the original agreement. So I went back to the original to see how it was all allocated out by definition terms. So going back through that, the wording was there, but there was no actual dollars assigned to it in the original agreement to have that initial association. So I've gone with the way that we currently do it based on change of activity name or things like that, and associated that goes back into that original format. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Other questions for Jodie or comments on the financial report? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Bit of a repeat kind of question or comment around the amount of information that we're getting in this report, and just reflecting on the fact that we're currently at the end of the financial year. And if you look at the annual planning that we do for a council process, and this is like, I guess, a shared annual plan, it'll be good to actually have that. And we haven't had it in the whole time that I've been on this committee for the 2 trienniums, the proper kind of financial budgeting planning, looking in detail at some of even the forward projections of where things are going to go. So personally, I'd like to see a bit more information around all of that. And I've got some specific questions around the breakdown, and your question, Mr. Chair, was interesting in terms of not having easy access to that. If it wasn't an agreement, I would have thought that breakdown would have been quite well articulated at the start. And just like even reflecting on the IT cost, that seems quite high given the number of staff involved. It'd be interesting to kind of see how that actually translates into that original agreement and where those numbers come from. And then, sorry, third point, but just around and I think Lucy mentioned earlier or Janine, around the building repairs. So the budget for those building repairs, I would have thought, because there's a annual allowance paid for by all of the councils, it would be coming out of that budget rather than a separate budget line. And looking further question later on, maybe in that section about how we got to the point of needing to do that. But yeah, just kind of how everything kind of all fits in. And there's a shared tenancy in there as well with Environment Southland and how that actually contributes into that building. Sorry, quite a lot of comments and questions all in one. But
yeah, no, thank you. So I guess what I'm trying to zoom out one level, and what I'm hearing is a desire to be able to look under the hood, for want of a better term, and especially not only to look under the hood as we currently have, but to cast forward with our future year financial planning, and to be able to similarly look at what's under the hood for the future, and to understand how the costs, the sharing arrangements are managed in practical terms on the ground, including from a property perspective and IT perspective. I'm not a technical financial guru, so I'm not sure the best way to respond to that need, but I'm sure it's not an unusual request. I'm sure you're probably getting it respect of other parts of what we do here at Environment Southland. Is that something that you think will be possible to respond to efficiently and effectively?
Absolutely. So from that, my take on this is going forward, obviously the additional budgeting breakdown and forecasting, the same as what we do with our other forecasting. We do this, but it's not previously been incorporated in this report. So that's a note for going forward. Future reference, we'll include that information in there. Around the support costs specifically, I can assure you that the associated building costs all get charged to ES, and we only attribute this portion across into the EMS group. So the costs are actually sitting in the appropriate place, I can assure you on that one. But part of this table as well was to have the conversation around exactly what it was that you wanted to see going forward, because those dollar terms were not broken down in the original agreement. So I thought if we could come up with a better method, so this was more for a discussion point, so that going forward into the next financial year, we can be really clear and concise with exactly how everything is there and give you that transparency.
And just one further, if I may, also just relating to, we're all going through a long-term plan period coming up as well, and it'd be good to actually have that governance strategic oversight of the long-term budgets. I mean, we're all going to be under rates capping and everything soon too, so but actually being able to tie this in rather than having one budget line coming to our councils, having the ability to govern it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I'll take this opportunity to connect and extend on that idea. A comment that I made yesterday to our own councillors as we were stepping through some councillor training with support from the EMS staff was that we've got a group plan that we are considering as a subsequent agenda item. We've got the emergency management bill currently working its way through Parliament, and we've got some pretty clear indications of which direction climate change is taking our region in the future. I think all of these things stacked suggest that we do have to give some meaningful thought to what the longer term needs of EMS and Southland are going to be, and that will have a flow-on effect to LTPs for the region in the coming months and into next year when we go to public consultation on that LTP. So I yesterday warned our councillors, watch this space. There will be more discussions on what this capability, this regional emergency management capability requires to meet the challenges ahead. And I know that in a rates capping world, those are going to be challenging, tricky conversations to facilitate at times. So I think the reality of it. And rate capping, because we were having a discussion about rates capping, and we know, I just caused me overnight to reflect that the submission period on rates capping is closed from a council perspective, and we're waiting for the guidance on that. So our ability to influence that, I'm not sure if there's much more space available for us to influence rate capping thinking at this stage in Central Wellington, but there's comments from the floor on that one. Katie, you wanted to offer a comment, or?
I've got comments on the previous items rather than coming on that. So more comments on your point first.
Yeah.
Just my interest, the table to know that at the Canterbury Joint Committee yesterday, they called a agreement to write a letter to the Minister to exclude emergency management BAU from rate capping, and the committee will agree to that, so that letter will be sent through to the Minister now. That's public agenda, so if you'd like to see it, it would be available.
Okay, so Canterbury are writing to the Minister to make that specific.
It was included in the agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
And was that to the Minister of Local Government who's overseeing that bill, or to our EM Minister?
Just one moment, please. I think it was actually Minister Mitchell. I apologise. My apologies. No, it was Minister Watson.
And so maybe the consideration is whether there would be a parallel or utility in a parallel approach from this council to also, from this committee to also write to in a similar vein, if people think that was useful. Did you want to comment on that one, Rob?
Yeah, just further to that, I think when we look at the nuance of Milford Sound and the fact that we're looking after tourists, actually trying to leverage some funding even from the international visitor levy kind of thing to come in and help support that, because it's effectively asking ratepayers to pay for.
Yeah.
So,
Michael.
My two relate probably back to Rob Scott's questions, which was, one was the building property item, which is, I actually think it's the reserve that we're looking for the breakdown and drawdowns in relation to what's being claimed by the councils, and then what's been drawn down from that reserve, and looking back historically, if you can have a look at that. That isn't something we've currently got, but if we can bring that in, so we can clearly see that, I think that covers off that item. The other one around the annual plan, we did discuss it a bit as a key, but we also had discussions offline. We didn't have fill in place in relation to it, so you can see that the budget line's been held at current levels, and that's based on the principle that going into the annual plan, no change in proposed. And Phil's got to work through for a plan for the next long-term plan and use the operational reserves that they have from this current year because of all of the shortages they've had. So that was kind of the message that was coming back to them. So just back to the councils around the annual plan perspective.
And I sense that Lucy is itching to add to that.
Yeah, just on the other matter around the IT related costs, just noting that those don't just pay for the staff associated with EMS. That's obviously about making sure that the centre's ready. So there's a whole bunch of licensing and computers and all the that goes in with making sure that those are maintained.
I could do a quick calculation. It looks like there's been a 6.6% increase from 2019 to 2026 in the overall total for year support costs. I thought that reflects a degree of efficiency.
Yes, to be between 2 and 4, doesn't it?
You are pointing at Jodie
And Evelyn.
Oh, Evelyn, sorry.
Right. I just was curious what IT can be a catch-all for a number of things, not just computers. Does this include our expansion of some of the emergency equipment that happened? Well, my brain is not quite connecting when it was, but we've installed over the last several years, additional means of communication between places. Does that include that? So it's not just what happens in this building with the staff that work for EMS directly, but that are on sites that are further out to enable responsiveness. Is that part of that, or?
Yes, so through you, Chair, yes, it is part of that. But to Michael's point as well, I think a deeper dive into the breakdown of what's sitting there will be something that will help provide that further information for the next report.
Thank you. Is there, can I just circle back, is there an appetite for this committee to write to the Minister around the rates capping requests in a parallel or similar fashion to what we understand Canterbury have communicated? And if so, we can take a lead on getting that knocked together quickly, and we would circulate it to the folk to have a look at before it's dispatched. But we'd want to do that pretty rapidly, I would have thought, given the time frame associated with that particular policy approach by central government. Do you have any thoughts, Tom?
I think we should, but would that letter best come in terms of leverage? Would it best come from this group or from the Mayoral Forum? Would be my question around that. It's a question, it's not an opinion actually. I'm just trying to think how.
Yeah. And you know, and in terms of responding, either seems technically feasible, where it'd be easy enough to knock up communication on that one. Christine, did you want to?
Just a comment, I just wondered, thinking in response to your comment about where it comes from, the Mayoral Forum. Don't disagree with the intent, but I guess in my head I'm thinking, it's a bit like GST, isn't it? How do we then support our debate and saying, well, how does that differentiate for all the other areas that would like exempt from rates capping as well? So what makes this different to all those other things, which will have, which will concern us all? And probably it's why I think a discussion at the Mayoral Forum about the bigger picture would be useful.
So based on that comment, what I'm hearing is if this was to occur, it would be better coming from the committee, in this instance on the rates capping issue for emergency management services specifically, or are you suggesting don't write it all?
No, I'm not suggesting don't write it all. I think we need to think about the letter in response to all the other things that, if any, that we might be requesting a rates exemption.
Yeah.
Rates
and I guess I'm having this conversation knowing that our opportunity to submit on this has closed already,
Yes.
and so it's not a public or a submission on this topic. It would be a specific communication to a minister. Rob, you had a comment off, and then I'll come to Phil. I think you were saying that.
Just thinking in terms of if I'm the minister receiving it, and if I've got one from Canterbury Emergency Management, and then I get one from Southland Emergency Management, it kind of puts it into that bucket of emergency management specific. Yeah, so that could help with the messaging of it's just emergency management. But yeah, I get Christine's point.
I think I agree actually. I mean, I was raising the question, but I never did. But I think that's correct. I think listening to Christine in particular, I think that's, you know, the appropriate argument. It's I mean, the issue will be that there'll be what might be called special pleading, you know, coming from all sorts of aspects of the business. But I think this one has got, so rather than the Mayoral Forum kind of listing things that we, you know, it probably would be more powerful to have it come from this group.
Well, we'll take that as an action item if people are comfortable with that, and we will distribute that in the very near future for folk to look at the draft before we dispatch it as a priority. Yeah, and we'll add that as a resolution to this particular set of recommendations.
Just as an aside, so it's the letter from Canterbury went to Minister Watt. So where's Minister Mitchell?
Yeah, I think that's
Copy.
definitely.
Yeah, sorry, should it be?
Apologies, I should have said it was sent addressed to Minister Watts, but it was copied into Nina and to Minister Mitchell.
Right.
So they also received a copy.
And I think through the chair, I think just to reinforce what Patty said, and the intent of the letter to exempt emergency management BAU is to acknowledge the incoming bill, and the incoming bill has clearly articulated there's going to be a circa $84 million cost to local government to deliver on that bill. So the linkages, if you rate cap, the bill will fail even before it becomes the act. So that's that linkage, because I totally acknowledge that all parts of local government would like to be excluded from rates capping. So that's the theme. Well, that's how Canterbury themed the letter, so I've been led to believe.
So the recommendations here, I'm just going to suggest there be a third one that we amend and add to this current list. The third one would be to have the committee write to Minister Watts, CC Minister Mitchell, requesting exemption for EMS BAU from the rates capping initiative in light of, and referencing the impact of the EM bill, anticipated impact of the EM. Happy to move, Mr. Chair. Yeah, happy to move. Clarify, moving all three. Yep. And seconded by me and Tom. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Jodie. Thank you for being so resilient and responsive to. Okay. Agenda item 5.4 is adoption of the Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Plan. The recommendations associated with this agenda item are to receive the report, to receive the approval letter from the Minister, and that's Minister Mitchell in this instance, and then the third one is to adopt the Emergency Management Southland Group Plan 2026-2031. Before we open this up for discussion, I just want to offer a few comments, if I may, on the significance of this decision. Essentially, this decision implicitly commits councils to a long-term resilience posture for the region. It kind of implies or signals that we accept an emergency management is no longer primarily about isolated disaster response. It's now about long-term regional resilience under conditions of increasing uncertainty and complexity. So it's implicitly acknowledging that Southland's emergency management challenge is becoming more complex and systemic, not simpler. And if you like, it strengthens the legitimacy of future discussions about resilience, investment, and preparedness. And I think that would acknowledge that for many of us cascades into other aspects of our business as usual, like council work. And I think of our flood intelligence and flood resilience investment at regional council level as an example. So the decision today would provide for continuity, institutional stability, and a defensible mandate for EMS capability development moving forward. Essentially, this is providing a strategic document for EMS through until 2031. So those are a few comments from myself on this one, and also acknowledging that a subsequent, it provides a strategic anchor for the annual business plan that we'll be considering as a subsequent agenda item. Been a big piece of work, and I know a lot of work has gone into it, and there's certain individuals who are probably going to be more relieved than others that this is finalised. So I just open up the floor to comments on this particular agenda item at this point.
Sorry, just a comment that a lot of work put into this group plan is good, and we've already approved all of that. I guess the other note in relation to your comments is that we are adopting this in a time of significant change. So it will probably need to be reviewed and adapted and re-looked at in the light of what might be ahead of us, which we're all aware of those.
So it's a very valid point, and the Minister in his response to this acknowledged and noted the importance of monitoring implementation of the report, and I think that speaks to that understanding there's a range of potential challenges and uncertainty that could divert us from what we aspire to achieve.
Yeah, on a very similar line, I think there has been a lot of work going into this, and it was kind of done at a point in time, but I'd really like to see this become a live document. We've got a new group manager coming in, there's going to be, we're doing reviews, there's going to be changing priorities, and I think for this to be really effective, we need to be able to make adjustments to as we move on, rather than just a whole lot of work goes into something that then sits on a shelf and doesn't even get referred to. So I would like to endorsement based on the fact that it's going to be live and able to be changed.
Look, I think it's a great piece of work. A question I would have is, given that we have got a new group controller came in, actually sitting beside you, whether he is comfortable with this document. I know that he was not involved in its development, but I mean, he's read it. So whether his eyes have, can he give us confidence that it's something he can actually support?
Through the chair, I think the staff and the wider team would probably give me a slapping if I said, no, let's go back to the drawing board. But no, I have reviewed it. It's cohesive. It speaks to future complexities, and I think it stands us in good stead for that strategic document to guide us for the next 5 years. No, I think it's been an outstanding piece of work, and I think the staff, the science, that this committee, all supporting committees should be acknowledged to get this across the line here. You have done.
Okay, so you're comfortable to pick this up as your kind of working document going forward. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And perhaps just to acknowledge, I think the obligation is on all of us to ensure it has a status as a living document. The adage that the plan is nothing but planning is everything springs to mind. It sets a baseline for us to adapt and adjust from as the situation unfolds ahead of us in a challenging period. Although I was reflecting, probably everyone at every point in history says, "Oh, what challenging times we live in." But maybe we're no more unique than any other period in history. But seems certainly a lot of things keeping us busy. I would offer the opportunity for someone to move that we accept those 3 recommendations. Yeah, Tom, seconder. Yeah, Rob, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And a big thank you to the staff who have put that together. It's positive thing, so well done. Okay, moving on to the next one. That's the business plan report and draft business plan, agenda item 5.5.
So this one again received the report as read, noting the strategic priorities, key focus areas, risks and flexibility outlined in the business plan, and to endorse the business plan as the strategic and operational framework for emergency management Southland for the 2026-27 financial year. And of note, I just the finances, the budget, Jodie's spoken to the finances, so that will be incorporated into the plan. And the plan has essentially been rolled over from last year as key priorities are still current. And with the new EM bill, the group plan implementation, a new manager on board, and further recruiting, we were quite conservative and to our approach about adding further workload to it. And if the passed and endorsed, then the work plan will flow from that as well. Open if there's any feedback or comment to be made.
A couple of observations is you mentioned there was an element of being conservative within that, but I also read an element of flexibility into what you've prepared, noting that there is some moving parts to this wider system that we're functioning within. And so I think what you've done is probably taken a very prudent approach to this, acknowledging that there will be yet influences that emerge or that are confirmed that will probably prompt us to think differently about life in the future moving forward and appropriately reflect that through our LTP efforts. But happy to open up the floor to other comments or questions.
Just going back to my previous comments, and I totally agree with the pathway taken on letting things get in, but I don't think the committee in the past has had enough say and influence on the strategic direction of this. So going forwards into that long-term planning piece, I'd really like to see this committee taking the driving seat and setting that. But yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm going to signal to the committee, probably as I signaled to our councillors yesterday, is that watch the space. I think we cannot avoid our obligation to engage more thoroughly around what might be required in the future resource-wise and what systems may be required and what may demand that we think differently about how we sustain and build resilience in the region. And yeah, this gentleman sitting beside me is looking forward to perhaps leading future conversations on that particular dimension of our work. Other comments on the business plan? Christine, sorry.
Thank you. Mine's just a query about where it fits. So we have the business plan looking ahead for the 26-27 year. I think Michael was indicating the budget sort of along the same lines, but we haven't got, well, not aware of, we haven't had a resolution that looks at approval of a budget. So when does that come to us, and how will that be managed, given there may be changes ahead with respect to the review that's occurring around some of those issues? They're then going to identify whether or not the business plan is actually able to be adhered to in the line of the intention that's there, particularly when it's mentioning constraints.
Yeah. I'm going to offer the opportunity to respond first to Michael and Lucy. I think
I'll hand over to Lucy shortly, but I think the intent would be we'd have to bring it up to the next meeting in relation to getting a formal approval in relation to the group, in relation to those plans. It is something that has been missed on the way through from the fact that we're waiting to have Phil on board. So that is something I'll work with the operations team as well to make sure that they get a recommendation up to the next meeting for the group.
And that's July, is it? Or?
Yeah, we will have to do something before then based on our annual plans. We'll get something circulated.
Yes, because I did ask a question about a budget approval for the previous year. I think Lucy indicated it was March, but I don't think we had a meeting in March of last year, so I'm not aware that we actually approved any budget for the past year. So, and to me, it aligns quite closely with the business plan in order to be able to do what we say we're going to do. Otherwise, I think staff always feel behind the eight ball of this, if the resource is not approved to be there. So it becomes a retrospective approval of the budget, or it doesn't, because we haven't got anything today, and I thought it was coming today.
So the draft budget that's included in your financial report is the high level budget that we talked through already. So there's a 26-27 draft budget in there. But as to what that breaks down to in terms of the connection to the business plan and the prioritisation part, I think it's that bit that's been missing. And so much to the similar comments from the financial report, we'll need to ensure that it's moving forwards joined together so that you can see how the breakdown of those budget lines, which talk about early kind of high level budget breakdown, how that actually translates through to the deliverables within the business plan.
Right. So it sounds like, from my interpretation of what I'm hearing, we are approaching the end of the current financial year and about to start the new one. There will be a budget for EMS activity, but what we're saying is that we're not going to have the ability to endorse a detailed breakdown of what that budget is through this committee ahead of the start of the financial year. And the best we could hope for is to do that retrospectively when we meet in August. Is that what I'm hearing?
So
have I articulated that poorly?
So I think that it wasn't deliberate. It's not a direct recommendation within your financial report, but the draft budget for 26-27 is in that financial report. I think what we're hearing from the committee is that they want a more detailed breakdown of what that budget expenditure is associated with, which isn't how we have framed the financial report or the business plan. So I think it's not that you have approved the budget, it's a draft budget, but it's not given the level of detail that we are hearing that you would like, and or the connection point to the business plan deliverables. That's how I'm. You know what I mean?
Through yourself, Chair, looking at so you will need to add an additional recommendation based on this, because if you approve the business plan as it currently is, you're approving an unfunded business plan. So you actually need a recommendation for, which is noting that the budget has been endorsed as per the as per previous financial reports, and that the business plan needs to be work needs to be done within the budget as approved.
And
There's no further budget that's coming back to councils for their annual plan. That's what it's trying to indicate.
What you're saying is essentially it defines the constraint for filling the crew is defined by what was in the financial report, agenda item 5.3. Essentially that locks you into, that's your money for the next financial year.
And I think that would be helpful, and I know we're going back that because there's no resolution to approve the budget. It's the resolutions to receive the financial report, which had those figures in there, but we didn't discuss that as the budget for the ensuing year.
So what that suggests is that there's a need in this agenda item for a fourth recommendation. That fourth recommendation would be a recommendation number 4 to note, and please correct me on this words if you find a better way to correct this, note that the draft budget outlined in agenda item 5.3 represents the budget for the business plan for financial year 26-27. Have I articulated that correctly? Or can someone suggest refinements to that? Michael, have I reflected the intent of what you explained?
Listening to that, can we get that read back? Because it sounds as though it probably will cover it.
No, the draft budget outlined in agenda item 5.3 represents the budget for the business plan for the financial year 26-27.
You probably need to change in
Defines
you need the approval. So somewhere there it's got to approve that the budget be held at the 25-26 level to go into it. So Christine,
I'm just looking for inspiration as to how to articulate
noted it, but you haven't approved it. So it's like
Instead of noting, is it adopt?
adopting the
To adopt that the draft budget in 5.3 represents the operational budget for business plan development 26-27.
perhaps the word represents should be replaced with defines or defines the budget.
Is the budget.
Is the budget. Can you, Dan, can I ask that you just articulate what you got?
Note the draft budget outlined in agenda item 5.3 is the budget for the business plan for the financial year 26-27.
Okay, so I think the missing word in there is to approve.
Is approved as the budget for.
Is approved as.
Note the draft budget outlined in agenda item 5.3 is approved as the budget for the business plan for the financial year 26-27.
Is everyone comfortable with that articulation as an additional recommendation to this agenda item? Okay. Thank you for that. Resolving that. Well, not resolving it. Talking about that. Are there any other questions before we move to voting on this this one? Any other comments on the business plan?
Just a comment, and look, I'm looking forward to not looking backwards, but just reflecting, I think the second meeting of last triennium, this budgeting kind of piece got raised, and I just want to make sure that we aren't in this position again, because retrospectively approving budgets isn't prudent governance. So I think if we can take this as that line in the sand now to actually look forward to make sure that we are getting that proper plan in advance and we are front filling it. Yeah, it's quite frustrating to be in this position.
No knowledge. And I've taken a big underlined, highlighted note in my notes here about making sure we understand the appropriate budget approval processes for EMS in the future, so that we're not caught in this situation again. On that basis, that's with that fourth additional recommendation. Is there someone who would be prepared to move that we accept those recommendations?
I'll second.
Moved by Mayor Rob, seconded by Mayor Scott. Campbell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5.6. My computer's gone to sleep. This is Project AF8 Program Strategy 2026-2036 report. It's on page 153. Lucy, are you on the hot seat on this one?
So through Chair, just acknowledging, as we mentioned before in the actions and matters arising, we've had extended the invitation to Alice to come along to speak to you today, as per the request from the previous meeting. However, she is at an conference, so she wasn't able to attend today. She did present to the coordinating executive group a couple of weeks, just last week. Oh my God, time flies. To the KEG and talk them through this exact same report and answer questions from the CEs. So I take the report as read, but I would just highlight a couple of things as reminders and as part of what's been being worked on the last wee while. So the operating subcommittee similarly have been talking about the AF8 programme and ensuring that the outputs from the last 10 years of work are being kept live for us as we traverse the next phase of planning, etc. But this is to be tabled today to set the next 10 years worth of direction. And you'll see there's a slight reframing based on the current needs that have been articulated through the steering group. Just as a reminder, it might not need to be said, but we obviously are just the banker for the AF8 programme and take care of Alice in terms of her kind of bread and rations. But the AF8 programme is jointly funded by all of those logos you can see on page 156 of our agenda. So happy to take any questions, Chair, acknowledging the fact that Alice is not here and we may need to take them away and come back.
Thank you. Comments, Tom?
Just a comment. I mean, one thing I do strongly support is that we move towards awareness to action. I mean, considering that, you know, this is work has been going on for 10 years. The reality is that I think probably 99% of people in the community would have no idea what it's about. Maybe recognise the word AF8, but would have no idea about any plans or anything that they should do. So I think moving to that phase of starting to engage the public and having them understand that this could happen and that, you know, they need to prepare for it. It's not necessarily us preparing for it, them preparing for it for themselves, their own families. I think that's a really important next step, and absolutely this is the time to do it.
Would it be correct though, there, and totally agree with that, but I think the strategy supports that focus to increase community engagement?
Yes, so I'll just add, Chair, so a lot of the work that the AF8 team have been doing over the last 10 years has been initial community engagement, lots of the roadshows that are done across the areas of which the AF8 programme covers. And just last year's roadshows was record numbers in terms of attendees across our province, but others too. So that, as the Mayor's noted, the AF8 brand is definitely well known. That shift to what does it mean for planned action and individual action is definitely what signals the next 10 years.
Thank you. Totally support what Mayor Campbell said, and just taking that one step further, do we know what the quantum is of how much we're actually contributing? Because like I'd quite like to see a return on investment, because we are going to have competing priorities with our funding, and we've been going for 10 years, so it's got quite a base to it now. So do we need to look at tapering off that funding just to keep it going, but not have that same level of input that was involved in setting it up? Because, yeah, I mean, reflecting on the earlier conversation around rate capping, the money's getting spread very thinly.
Yeah. Lucia, you have a comment on the quantum or the level of investment as a first part of that?
Through you, Chair, not off the top of my head, but I've got my finance pack that I can look first, and it's within that, so I can certainly answer the question, but I might let the conversation carry on, and then once I've eyeballed the spreadsheet.
And I said the first part because I suspect the second part, in terms of how do you quantify the benefits that accrue from readiness, understanding, and intelligence, that's probably a little bit harder to put a quantum figure on in terms of measuring the return on investment. If we do a great job, everyone survives, damage is constrained and limited. So it's more about, you know, what costs do we avoid, but as you say, we've still got to be wide-eyed and aware to what are we paying for? What do we get for that? And what ways does it flow on to benefit to our communities? In this case, a connected community to the rest of the South Island.
Through Chair, I've just found the number and just noting that Jodie's obviously had to go, but one of the actions that we took from the previous rounds of conversations with the committee and with the KEG was to separate out the two portions of money from a reporting perspective. So internally, I get a different view on the AF8 money versus the EMS portion. So what's been reported to you today in the previous finance doesn't include the AF8 numbers. So when we report back to the next meeting, we'll make sure that you've got that line item too. But the total quantum budgeted for our AF8 contribution is $80,000 for the year. And then we pay proportionally as part of the group that pays into it. So the likes of Canterbury, sorry, I should put it, the likes of Canterbury pay more as part of their contribution to AF8 than we do. But again, we can bring back the detail of how that agreement was set up and what the basis for the breakdown is.
Can I just clarify, when you say we pay 80,000, who's the we?
The group, our group,
okay.
contributes 80,000 a year.
I guess this just ties back into the earlier conversation about the lack of detail in the budgeting, because we had no idea that we're contributing that, and we're finding out now in a subsequent report. And that might be, I'm not saying it should be, but that might be something that we actually want to discuss. And we're retrospectively now approving that without having the ability to even look at it. So yeah, I guess it's just piecing it all together.
And through your Chair, just noting the group previously committed to what it's committed to in terms of the ongoing funding for AFA. So it's not a decision that's been made elsewhere. It's a decision that predates this conversation. So, but I totally take the Mayor's point. We need to bring that back so that we're drawing those lines together.
Yeah, and maybe the obligation is every time there's a 3-year cycle of elections is to review some of those commitments if they have a time bound commitment, or to make sure that a new set of faces around the table remains comfortable with the level of investment and a commitment of that nature. So that's probably an appropriate thing to think about as we move forward, noting that it could be a very different arrangement in the future following a next local government election. Different partner agencies.
Through the Chair, the AFA governance group, of which the South Island group managers sit on, as well as others, are very conscious of the fiscal impacts, and we challenge ourselves around what is, a prudent amount to spend, acknowledging we also need to not front foot, but demonstrate leadership in this space to then attract science funding, national funding, and other funding streams by saying we are also contributing to the science, to the education, to different aspects of it. And I think, it is acknowledged as a cornerstone science community emergency management project. But I think, as you say, this strategy also very clearly articulates we've now educated the public about what AFA is. It's now what? So what? And I think one of the other things that is also captured in here is that lens about the recovery. Recovery post AFA is going to be significant. So what can we do now to front foot it? So obviously some of the science is now starting to drill into the the damage levels and some of the infrastructural impacts. But we now know from previous large events across New Zealand, local, regional, national recovery structures are different every time. How can we actually front foot some of this so that we know if and when AF8 happens, what's the recovery structure going to look like, so we can actually preload some of that mahi.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to support Tom's comment about moving to action, because I still struggle to see all that work that's been done, and then what my view of what happened in October and the relationship between that education and managing in a wind event that still left us bewildered and with a lot of concerns about not only infrastructure but a number of other areas in respect of one isolated event. I guess the review will feed into as well, so we'll have an opportunity to discuss that later, but the two are tied together, and but I'm not sure that we see that as evidenced in our approaches.
A question I had was the recommendation number 2 is support the implementation. In practical terms, what does that commit us to doing support? Is it sums up in media press releases, or is it more substantial than that in terms of us giving support to what we understand as a wider effort?
That second one, Chair.
The second one.
The second one. So there will likely be some sort of a launch around the new strategy, the revised strategy. I haven't got eyes on the detail of that, but I can find out from Alice and we can bring more detail back on that one. In terms of it's a support that we're seeking, as well as the next steps.
And I imagine there's similar agenda items being considered around the South Island by other.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Really?
It's being tabled at each of the JCs for everybody to be considering. And a number, as Phil mentioned, the group managers sit on the steering group. Previously, there has been a governance representative on that steering group. It was Neville Cook before. I'm not sure if one has been appointed for this next phase. So again, another question I could ask of Alice.
Thank you. And acknowledging the implications for co-investment and attracting additional investment, often that need to demonstrate, that you have skin in the game in order to attract others to support your mahi, to make things happen.
On that topic specifically, Chair, just I noted that the NEMA contribution is quite significant to the programme, as well as what used to be EQC. So between the two of them, they're about almost $300,000 a year goes into the AFA programme from both of those entities as well.
Thank you. Sorry, England, yes.
No, continue your.
I was going to observe that in some respects, building understanding, building knowledge, building intelligence, to me, that seems to align with where I think Southland is evolving to, with intelligence-led resilience. And I think I know at Regional Council, our investment in flood intelligence information supports outcomes of a similar ilk. So I use the term intelligence-led resilience because I think that's highlights the importance of when you can increase your level of understanding, you can increase your level of anticipation and levels of preparedness and readiness means that you're more resilient in the event of an emergency or an event. So I think that's consistent with that line of thinking. But Evelyn.
So when this came up last week, me doing the usual dumb question thing, I asked about late tsunami because I had seen something and it had piqued my, are we, and Alice was right over top of it. These are things that are considering. So if we're looking at where we're going with increasing awareness and all these things, the fact that we have a science-led and informed-led intelligent conversation going on about what we are becoming aware of that has happened in other places, what might be risks that we had not previously said out loud because we didn't think about it, or nobody asks the question out loud, so nobody answers the question out loud. Things like that are important, and I think that it will not happen quite as easily if we think we can take our foot off the pedal a little bit because we've done all this other work. I think AF8 is going to be an animal like nothing else we have seen in our lifetimes, if I see it in mine. We can never be too prepared. We can never have asked too many questions. We can never have done too much research because I don't think equating it necessarily with the wind event that we had in October is necessarily the right thing, but what it is saying to us is that responsiveness to each individual event has to have a little bit of flexibility and open-mindedness about what events might look like and what we might need to do. But AF8 is going to be something altogether different, and as much as we can prepare and plan around here, what it's going to mean for people on the ground is going to be different depending on where you live. So we're even going to have those different conversations. If you live in Invercargill, it's going to be different than if you live in Te Anau, or if you live in, how we get those messages across in ways that don't frighten the horses is the mission, isn't it?
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions on this agenda item? On that basis, is someone prepared to move that we accept those two recommendations of receiving the report and supporting implementation? Thank you, Mayor Tom. And Neville, thank you for seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, carried. That brings us to agenda item 5.7, the Piopio Tahi Milford Sound Collective Hazard Risk Communication Strategy Report. That's on page 167 of our agenda papers.
Again, just noting that Alice isn't here to speak to this, but if there are questions, Tracy can answer a lot of those as she sits on the working group for this as well. The purpose of this report is to present the Piopio Tahi Milford Sound Collective Hazard Risk Communication Strategy for governance, awareness and oversight. The report outlines the strategic intent, background and implications of the approach adopted to ensure natural hazard risk, particularly earthquake and landslide-induced tsunami risk, is communicated consistently and transparently to visitors and workers in Piopio Tahi Milford Sound. So the recommendation for this one is to receive the report as read, but if there are any questions, we can open it up. Noting that the core working group for this is led by Alice. NEMA sit on it, MSTL, EMS, DOC and Tourism New Zealand, and it is also shared through NEMA to highlight the importance of this. So if there's any questions.
So it's a pretty fresh and recent strategy, and this is version 1 of the strategy. Can I ask, is there any indications from the front line as to what reactions this might be triggering? Are we seeing tourists in Milford trembling more? Are they being alarmed by some of the communications they're receiving? What sort of flow-on effects are we seeing, or is it too early to?
It's actually been really good. It was not sold in the way of we're here to scare tourists. It is very much we're here to inform them of the risk, and that was something that came out after Whakaari happened as well. While they went to an active volcano, they genuinely didn't think they'd be taken to a dangerous place and weren't aware of the risk and had we known. And so we don't and yet see any reduction in tourist numbers. There may be one or two that choose not to go there for that, but it is more informing that while there is a very low risk for those that are going in there just to catch a cruise boat out for a couple of hours and leaving again, it's not no risk, and that they should be collectively aware of.
And the tour operators, they have been involved with this, and they are comfortable, and are they meeting their obligations?
There have been a few of the larger tourism operators had actually been implementing, piecemeal, advice from EMS anyway, and so this is actually just to really get a collective understanding, but also if everyone's saying the same thing, it's a very consistent message across all of the tourism operators. And so this document here is given them the actual tools for how to implement on each of their websites. It's actually going out to international trade. We made sure we had it ready to go for all of those trade shows overseas. I handed it to the Australian consulate last week. It has gone nationwide and further apart.
Okay, thank you. And I like the different audience journey maps component of it. I think it's good to separate that out. Understand there's folk who are there for different reasons and with different considerations, and thus the risk dimension is different for those different audiences. So that's positive. Questions, comments from the floor? Rob?
Thanks. Just a question around, I see MSTL as being the kind of key in all of this with their role as an employer and a provider of those services. When you look at Whakaari White Island and what happened and where the finger gets pointed in an event. So are they playing a leading role in all of this given their scope over their day?
It's a committee of, so we're all equal members, and MST included. This strategy was actually born out of a really large scale, which we've brought to this table before, 6-stage research project. So stage 0 essentially was the large communications piece of how do we explain risk, what are the figures, what are comparisons, and then we had key comm staff from each of that key working group work on this document. And there's a few things in there that some people might not have, we didn't put compared to bungee jumping at this point, because we knew how far we wanted to get this, and we didn't want to have to backpedal on anything we'd put in there as the science evolves, and it is a live document, and as we reach each stage. Collectively for that stage 0, all of the members of that committee chipped in. EMS fronted the supporting of Alice to lead this piece of work. Stage 1, EMS actually applied to the National Resilience Fund, and stage 2, NEMA with a bit of support for DOC. So MST hasn't necessarily contributed financially other than their part in the stage 0, as much as EMS and NEMA have, but we still need to work through how the funding for stage 3 to 6 will work.
Yeah, which leads into my next question around, and I said it right at the start of this meeting, was around the funding of it, where this is predominantly tourism focused, and when we press for funding, should the ratepayers of the Southland region be funding that when you've got that? And yeah, so again, pointing to that international visitor levy or more that user pays piece to actually fund this important piece of work, because the risk outweighs our ability to actually fund it locally.
It's a conversation I suspect has been held before, but we're in a, it seems to me we're in a very strange situation in Milford, that we fund both measures to encourage people to go to Milford Sound, and at the same time we fund measures to try to, I don't say discourage, but to warn them about going. I mean, we through Great South, we are funding initiatives that are encouraging people to go there, and at the same time, well, I'll say that, because there's not a lot that you can do to mitigate the risk. If somebody's in there, they're carrying that risk, so they're making that personal choice. On the one hand, as I say, we're encouraging them to go. On the other hand, we're almost discouraging them to go. So we actually have, it seems to me, been quite a funny position, and I don't know how well we have talked that through.
No,
and it
I-
didn't really greatly affect this paper.
No, it's, and what you've just touched upon, actually, if you think about it, this is a cascading issue, and it's not limited. I reflect upon our role as stewards of risk and opportunity. Even if you think about climate change and in the future, is it appropriate to be building a house here? Because making sure that people who are engaging and interacting with our landscapes understand the risk of doing so, and for certain types of activities at certain times and certain locations. And I think that's the obligation on us, because we're often the ones who, more than anyone else, understand the range of risks and how they intersect. But how do we make sure that that is communicated to the stakeholders who are either here on a temporary basis, an extended basis, or a permanent basis?
I think White Island was a bit different, because there were hazard levels which were, a certain amount of activity, had triggered another hazard level. So when the boats went there, they knew what that situation was. They knew what the level of hazard was. Could happen any time, but they had an idea of what the hazard level was. Milford's different, because the hazard level is pretty much uniform all the time. You can't really predict it. You cannot predict an earthquake or a landslide. I'm not through this suggesting that we should stop people going to it. I just, it is a funny situation that we're into, both encourage and discourage through funding from the state.
No, acknowledging that, we one of the things of Southland, and I know Lucy, you want to offer a comment. So.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just note, and in your operational report, you'll see reference to the direction that we were given as part of the Sustainable Destinations Board don't remember what the new name for it is, but the board that exists that took over from what was Milford Opportunities, and on that board is chaired by Doc's chief exec and senior folk from Naikahu and obviously myself and other operators. And one of the pieces that they've asked us to do before the end of June is to come up with a response evacuation and plan for Piapiatahi. Partially, and I've been working on that with Doc, and definitely connected to that is Mayor Scott's point around how and what might we need from a future use for from the levy. So it is being looked at as very much a kind of partnership project, and we also need to be thinking about Mayor Campbell's point, agnostic of event. There's been a lot of good science and information about the risk of tsunami in Piapiatahi, but that is not the only thing that keeps me awake, and soon will keep Phil awake, in regards to how and what we will need to be responding to in Milford. It's a hazard, diverse, rich environment, and how we deal with that, both in response and recovery, needs documenting and real clear ownership, which is one of the things we have struggled with collectively over the past.
So I would recognise that this is the communications strategy, which is one part of a bigger system of understanding obligations and response, and the 4Rs dimension of managing risk in that location.
And a really critical one for us all to be able to be speaking with the same song sheet around what the risks are was a really critical step forward over the last couple of years, so that we can now have a bit more of a stronger foundation to say, okay, we're in it together from a communications perspective. What does that now mean from an action perspective and a reduction perspective?
So in that perspective, does this represent a collective, I'll call it a bit like a music sheet, a song sheet, that we're all singing the same words at the same pitch, tone to the right different audiences? And I'll go to you, Tracy, because I sense you're going to offer a follow-on comment from that one.
Yes, we've created a website page on the EMS website. So every single tourism operator that's been supplied this, as far as Doc is essentially working out how they can write this into their concessions. As we're asking for voluntary participation, and many have taken that up now. But for anyone that holds a concession in there, it will move to this is actually not voluntary anymore. Part of you operating in this hazardous space is to provide that information to your customers, and then the further work to, and how are we going to extend the health and safety of this to how are you going to look after them as part of your business continuity if something was to happen. And to your comment of the hazard doesn't change, you're dead correct, but the exposure risk does. That you might have 70 people staying there overnight. We have 3,000 people there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I, in morbid fascination, stand there sometimes and watch people get off the nice warm bus and get on the nice warm boat and back again in their jeans and no water bottle and no backpack. There is a lot of people that genuinely do not understand that they're going into a very isolated spot, and there's the potential they won't make it back to their hotel that night. So not even the doom and gloom of a major landslide tsunami, it could be something as a fire in the tunnel, and that delays their trip by 12 to 16 hours, and they've left their medication and passport back in Queenstown. So it's very much about informing of this risk, gives them the opportunity to take some snacks, a water bottle and a rain jacket at the most basic level, and then how do we move forward with then getting them a bit more prepared for that space.
Just a further piece around the funding of it, and that's something that ties into the whole rating piece, but we can't get new rates income for this Doc estate. So Doc gets the income from the concessions. We make no money because government don't pay rates on government land, and yet we're expected to fund the support there. So when we're doing our advocacy piece, that's quite an important piece to actually add in to that mix.
Good point. Any other comments on this particular agenda item? The ask of us in this case is not a big ask, it's asking us to accept the report or receive the report. I'm happy to move that one. Thank you, Rod, and Tom seconding that one. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, carried. That brings us to agency updates with NEMA being listed. Okay.
Take the report first, please. Just still waiting on the emergency management bill and that report going to select committee on the 9th of June. Just draw your attention to the map that we've included in this report. There has been a really busy start to the year. That's 21 states of emergency across the country, majority of those obviously being in the North Island. But what it does then for recovery, so we've got 6 regions currently in active recovery, 2 regions in recovery that's been managed through VA or through the councils. And then there are a further 2 regions, I think, there that are also in recovery, but from events that happened last year. So that's the majority of the country is in some form of recovery at the moment. The only other point I wanted to mention was just that NEMA has been successful in the recent budget announcements. So we have the MSOS project funded, and the MSOS project is uplift in operational technology systems. There's 4 parts to the MSOS program. First is around getting consolidation of key national, regional and local data sets. The second will be coming up with that data visualization tool that we've long spoke of, the common operating picture that everyone has been asking for. Also looking at a range of operational tools that will help emergency management personnel task, collaborate and manage resources in response and recovery. And finally, we're looking at an update to the national warning system. In terms of timing on when you can expect to see this roll out within the next 6 to 8 months, there will be some improvements to the national warning system with a view to completing that entire piece of work within the next 18 to 36 months. Any questions for me on the report?
I've got one. You might not be able to answer it, but just around the number of state of emergencies. And I know there's been quite a push to declare early, and there was quite a bit of a push back at the last one with Waikiwi being referred with the Prime Minister. But do you think when you're comparing historically, where there might have been a reluctance to declare and now that reluctance is gone, does that distort the graph a little bit when you kind of see that there's more states of emergencies in terms of that declaration versus non-declaration?
It isn't a pure number, absolutely. Because you declare, there are different states, and also some of them might be a district declaration versus a regional declaration, and it doesn't necessarily speak to the damage, I guess. I think possibly what is more interesting is to look at the proportion of the country in recovery, which does speak to sort of like the effects of those weather events. And what you're certainly seeing at the start of this year is that cyclone season that we are now starting to have, particularly in the North Island. And there are other graphs that I could include here in here, but which really show an uptick in the types of emergencies, and it's very, very much in the severe weather. But I do agree with you, it's not a pure number to say or necessarily means more.
Katie, probably a follow-on question, and it links back to a learning orientation with so many events and thus so much recovery going on. Do we ever, is there anticipated there'll be a mechanism to sort of capture lessons learned from the various recovery activities in various regions to sort of draw insights from that?
That is something that is happening and is underway. So in the recovery space in particular, the National Recovery Office is and there are learnings being identified there. There is also work underway at NEMA that is pulling together some sort of like collective understanding of what's happened at the start of this year and what we can learn from that. And they will be those lessons will be disseminated out to the groups.
It just seems that the more times we get impacted, the richer the learning.
And they will have an opportunity to learn the first half of this year.
I just hope that we make sure we exploit all of those opportunities. There's some of us who are thankfully not currently showing on your map as a coloured region, but we hope to also get some of the insights from other regions for those events that surprise us.
And I think through the chair, even to reflect on that map, the colour map, which is very insightful. I think what isn't captured there is obviously sometimes the emergency operations centres or ECCs are activated and they don't declare, they're still busy. But the other key thing I want to allude to here is that staff are more often deploying to support neighbouring ward regions in the North Island. So, a number of South Island staff, did go to the North Island during the cyclone season. So I think there's two opportunities for learning here. Is obviously for the unfortunate host region that was impacted, but also for us to push and encourage staff to deploy to support the impacted regions, so that those staff get to expose themselves to operational aspects and then bring that experience, knowledge back to the home region to share, upskill, and just, dare I say it, stay match fit. So that's one of my hopes and visions for this CDM group, is that we also lean forward in that offering up of both my staff, but also councils encourage and enable staff to be released to deploy to the North Island or just next door, because I think there's a huge amount of networking and upskilling to be achieved in that aspect.
That's really good point. Thank you. The recommendation is that we receive the report from Katie. Someone happy to move that one? Thank you, Rob. And second, me, Tom. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us to the point where it's appropriate to move to public excluded. Jan, are you able to remind us for the reasons or justification for doing so?
Moving into public excluded business to confirm the minutes of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting held on the 27th of March to deal with invoicing proposal regarding generators and mana whenua emergency facilitator role. The grounds are to protect the privacy of natural persons, section 7.2a, to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage in negotiations, including commercial and industrial, section 7.2i.
Thank you.
Can I also ask that you include Dean into your allowance to be at this session in relation to the mana whenua?
Thank you for making that request. Is everyone comfortable with Dean joining us for that discussion around the mana whenua emergency facilitator pilot agenda item? Thank you. Welcome.
Did you want me to run in first? I think it's a second on the item.
It's, no, we've just got to confirm the agenda. I think we're good. Stay with us, Dean. First task is to confirm the minutes from the previous public excluded. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So we need a mover and a seconder to move to public excluded. We'll have someone who's prepared to move. Neville, thank you. Seconder. I'm happy to second that. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We'll just make sure we're moving to offline or proceeding.